Welcome to Cinema Ignite. Today's featured film is Kraken. In the Arctic, geologists Julia and Oscar are conducting underwater experiments with explosives when they receive a call warning them of an approaching storm, forcing them to wrap things up quickly. Not far away, a Russian submarine picks up unusually strong noises of mysterious origin, only to discover that the ocean floor seems to be rising. Meanwhile, Julia's equipment begins to malfunction just as the ice around her camp starts to split apart. Julia tries to grab her research, but Oscar pulls her onto the snowmobile before it's too late. The submarine crew realizes the noises are biological, only to be struck by something massive underwater. On the surface, cracks surround Julia and Oscar, forcing them to leap off their snowmobile just before it explodes and sinks. The camp erupts in explosions, sending the last scientists to their deaths. The submarine takes heavy damage, shaking violently as the crew fights to stay upright. They fire back, and the flash exposes massive tentacles in the water. One man crashes through a glass panel and blacks out, while another manages to send an emergency signal just before the sub goes under. At Russian Marine headquarters, news of the lost submarine spreads. With its cargo of powerful weapons at risk, a rescue mission is launched. Leading it is Victor, brother of the sub's captain. His family fears he'll vanish too, but his mother gives him his late father's watch for luck. That night, Victor arrives at the docks and finds Admiral Olshansky joining the mission, though the crew doubts he's fit for it. On board, sailors complain about being pulled from vacation. Meanwhile, Julia and Oscar wander through a snowstorm, struggling to get a signal. Julia, too focused on her phone, nearly slips into a deep crevasse, but Oscar grabs her just in time. Julia's phone briefly connects to an oil rig, but the storm drowns out her voice and the signal cuts. Desperate, Oscar fires a flare before collapsing. By morning, the sub reaches the site and dives after long prep. Olshansky pulls Victor and the senior officers aside to read a report that leaves them shaken, sparking rumors about the last sub's fate. Julia and Oscar find the buoy stuck in the ice and decide to wait there. The sub detects its signal and moves in, but a pod of whales surrounds them. When one hits the propeller, Olshansky orders the sonar on, ignoring Victor's warnings about harming the animals. The sonar scares the whales off, but they soon return before fleeing again. Then the seabed rumbles, a massive tentacle emerges, and a whale is killed in a single strike. The crew panics as the radar shows something massive approaching. Olshansky wants to fire, but Victor orders them to hide instead. They slip into an ice crack, the sub shaking with each hit, while the rising noise pounds in the crew's ears. The sub is forced to stop when the ice wall blocks their path, but the pursuer is already gone. As the crew checks the damage, Olshansky scolds Victor for risking too much, and they resurface for repairs. Julia and Oscar huddle for warmth until the ice cracks and the submarine surfaces. The crew spots them, confirms they're unarmed, and listens to their story. Olshansky orders they be given food and left behind as possible spies, but Victor shows mercy and brings them aboard. The sub dives again to search near the buoy. After a checkup and food, Victor sits with Julia and Oscar, showing them a map and asking about their camp and anything unusual they noticed. When Julia mentions the explosives, Victor concludes they sank his brother's sub. The crew debates turning back, and Olshansky warns they can't risk another attack without backup. But Victor, determined to find his brother, orders them toward Julia's camp. Olshansky pulls Victor aside, warning that one more mistake will cost him everything. Victor insists they push forward quickly, believing any survivors in the lost sub are almost out of air. Julia notices a strange sound, which Oscar identifies as sonar. Then the radar shows the enemy approaching again, but with no place to hide, Victor signals the oil rig. They're relieved when the rig allows them to hide there.
While the submarine gets ready to resurface, rig workers spot massive tentacles rising from the sea and sound the alarm. The creature smashes the rig, explosions erupt, and the workers panic as the structure collapses beneath them. When the sub loses contact, Victor checks the periscope and sees the tentacles tearing the rig apart. He shares the image with the crew, and once the rig is gone, the monster turns its sights on them. The sub makes a sharp turn to escape, sending everything in the kitchen flying. Olshansky calls it Victor's third mistake and takes command, firing 2 torpedoes that score a direct hit. But his confidence vanishes when the crew reports the enemy is still moving. More torpedoes hit, but the monster keeps coming. Olshansky freezes, unsure what to do, forcing Victor to take command again. Victor pushes the sub to full speed, dodging most of the strike, but a tentacle still clips them. The impact knocks the crew off balance, leaves Victor dazed. Some of the computers short-circuit, and one even crushes a man. The sub sinks as the monster hits again, causing an explosion in the torpedo room. The crew seals the compartment with 7 men inside to fight the fire. Another hit sends the vessel plunging, and the radar radar shows the monster surrounding them. It turns out to be a Kraken. Out of weapons, the crew follows Victor's order to go silent mode since the monster tracks noise. The fire crew is forced to stop, and carbon monoxide fills the torpedo room. The beast's noise blasts through the headphones, and the trapped men fear they'll die there. Luckily, Victor's silence plan drives the Kraken away. The blaze is out of control, and a few men are burned. Victor commands the crew to evacuate and sacrifice the weapon. They drag the injured out, slamming the door shut behind them. By shifting pressure, the fire is finally stopped. Repairs start as the injured are taken to the infirmary. Oscar and Julia help them treat the men's injuries, gaining respect from the crew. While Julia treats Victor's cut, an officer reminds her he saved both her and Oscar, even if it meant breaking the rules. Victor asks the crew for their view, and they agree it's safer to head back with no clue where the other sub is and no defense against the Kraken. Wolshinsky reminds him his father once saved lives but died doing it. After some hesitation, Victor agrees to retreat. As the sub heads home, Victor reads his father's last letter. Julia interrupts, spotting birds in his room, which he uses to monitor oxygen. She then asks for a map and marks the Kraken sightings and her camp. Sailors' tales say the Kraken once destroyed many ships before disappearing, which led scholars to think it had gone into hibernation deep below. Julia concludes that her explosives disturbed this resting place and awakened it. She insists the sonar must be shut off because the sound will surely draw the beast toward them again. Impressed by Julia's knowledge, Victor asks if she knows where his brother's submarine might be. She explains that octopuses often drag prey to their lairs, which would be near her old camp. Just then, an officer interrupts with a clue, a recording taken during silent mode. In it, they hear knocking on metal, and when they trace the signal, it points straight to Julia's camp, suggesting survivors may still be alive. Victor tells the crew that saving lives is worth the danger and commands a course for Julia's camp. During the trip, he recalls getting lost in the mountains as a boy, but the memory ends when they reach the area. Rivets shoot from the walls and glass explodes, showing the depth is crushing the ship, so they move higher. An officer spots a bottomless abyss, and Victor decides to send the mini-sub to investigate. With one pilot injured, he volunteers to go himself, leaving Olchansky in command. The mini-sub dives with Victor and 2 men aboard, the metal creaking as the pressure builds. Just as they consider turning back, an echo leads them to a graveyard of ships, confirming the old myths. They locate the other sub, badly damaged yet still whole at the front. The docking proves difficult on the rough currents, but they finally make it. Victor, in diving gear, crosses over and opens the hatch, thrilled to find the crew alive, especially Alexander. The good news reaches the main sub, and the crew celebrates. Alexander explains he kept his vessel in silent mode, sending signals only now and then to avoid the Kraken. Victor loads as many survivors as the mini-sub can carry, but it's clear a second trip will be needed. Victor remains behind with Alexander, letting a mechanic fill in for pilot. A tracker is set on the wreck, but quickly turned off, fearing it could alert the Kraken. The wreck trembles as the mini-sub departs, yet holds, and they return safely with survivors to the main sub. The replacement pilot is too sick for another trip, so Julia convinces Oscar to take his place. With his past submarine experience, he agrees and joins the mission. As the mini-sub departs, Olchansky notices the Kraken stirring on the radar. Meanwhile, Victor and Alexander head into the wreck to recover the weapons their superiors demanded. Inside, they find the safe with the codes, but the system refuses to respond. Victor stubbornly works through the controls until, after many failed attempts, the computer finally powers up, revealing the weapons are still active. The EMP is caught by the mini-sub, which changes course to follow it. Back on the main submarine, the crew panics as the Kraken closes in. They drop the vessel onto the bedside and switch to silent mode, hoping to avoid detection. But the creature shoves a massive rock against them, and the pressure makes rivets pop and metal groan all around. Water begins flooding a compartment, and the crew fears they can't stay in silent mode much longer. Meanwhile, the mini-sub reaches the wreck. During docking, they accidentally bump the tracker, switching it back on. Just as the Kraken is about to strike the main sub, it detects the signal and turns toward its lair instead. Seizing the chance, Olchansky orders the crew to head for the surface. Meanwhile, Victor crawls through a narrow pipe to reach the torpedo room, blocked off by wreckage. Alexander hears the mini-sub dock and orders his men to board, choosing to stay behind for Victor. At last, Victor makes it to the weapons bay and begins entering the codes into the torpedoes while Alexander does the same on the computer. But the arming process is slow, long enough for the Kraken to find them. The crew braces as the Kraken's tentacles close around the sub. Over the radio, Victor and Alexander share a final apology for their past fights. The monster rips away half the vessel, but luckily, it's only the empty tail. As it strikes again, the brothers time their actions perfectly, pressing the launch together. A massive explosion blasts into the Kraken, heating its body until it bursts apart. The blast sends a beam of light piercing through the Arctic ice, shooting all the way into the sky. Water floods the wreck as the weapons tick towards self-destruct. The submarine sinks fast, waves tearing the brothers apart. Victor spots Alexander's hand above the water and pulls him back to safety just in time. They rush up the stairs and into the mini-sub, sealing the door as water crashes behind them. With only 2 minutes before the blast, the vessel won't undock. The wreck begins to sink into the abyss until Victor yanks the emergency lever, freeing the mini-sub just in time. The mini-sub escapes just before the blast, the shockwave tossing it through the sea. On the surface, the crew nearly loses hope until bubbles rise and the mini-sub appears. Cheers erupt as Victor and Alexander embrace. Victor offers their father's watch, but Alexander insists insists he keep it. Days later, they return to Russia, reuniting with their family at last.